You're not famous yet, Roland? Ah, my goodness. You need to invent a word. So what's the next buzzword you can coin? Something like morose. Like maybe you could make it graveyarding for processes. Oh yeah. Or like sleep murder. What's business sleep murder?
I'm just dying a little bit in there. I thought demystifying was a nice word that I invented, for our little subtext,
You didn't invent demystify.
Well, kind of. I put it together. I put it together with the other words. So anyway.
I see it.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlandson. Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. I'm so excited to be co-hosting once again, my friend. Good to see your face. Good to be talking with you about things that are exciting for both of us. No spoilers on today's show.
But we will see. We will see, JM.
We will see if it's exciting. Wait, hold up. Wait. Am I still on the hook? Maybe
if it's exciting for both of us, we will see. But yeah, it's weird. Who are you, stranger? Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, no one has, but I'm back and I am happy as heck to be back. So for those of you who are on LinkedIn and haven't seen me post, get ready for a little bit of a different vibe. For those who've been watching us on YouTube or on Spotify, we have, no spoilers, but you'll see more of my face and you'll see more of my content coming real soon. But Roland, this episode is called What's Your Baseline in 2026?
But before we get started, in all seriousness, I like to have a very heartful, big thank you to Caspar, Matus, and Russell, who stepped up big time in helping me producing some of the What's Your Baseline podcast episodes over the last couple of months. Sometimes I was alone in the woods, so thank you, Brienne. Thank you, Regina, for holding up with me, right? So anyway, but I'm glad to have you back, right? And for the three other guys, I owe you. So just having said, if you need a co-host, just call me. We'll step in.
Yeah. Sometimes you owe them. I also owe them, my friends. Thank you. A heartfelt from me as well, man. And you did a great job. Like, it's always encouraging to see people we love to have on the podcast when they're behind the co-host chair. Also do a great job in representing for their beliefs and their opinions and asking great questions of our guests. I think we got some fantastic episodes out of that. So thank you to all of you. And thank you to our audience for putting up with this. We're back, my friends. We are back. And that leads us to today's topic. Because not only are we back, but boy, we are about to be even greater. So Roland, tell me a little bit more about the topic today and what we're looking to do.
It's a little bit scary, to be quite honest, because I teased it on LinkedIn multiple times, hashtag build in the open, and there's some new stuff coming. But until today, only a small handful of people actually knew what we're planning for What's Your Baseline in 2026. And maybe to get a little bit back to put it in perspective, and you've seen some changes, right, already. So you've seen, for example, that Monica Leitner has translated my process mining book. Thank you very much. You've seen that Hanneke has written a couple of articles on Substack. Thank you very much. And there's a bunch of other people that we are lined up in the background who you will learn more about when the time comes. And what we will do is, and I don't know if it's like spoiling, we want to bring What's Your Baseline to the next level. So maybe we start with a little bit of the past and have a little bit of a backstory, how this all came about. And I spoke about that a couple of times in other episodes. But basically the idea was, and I don't know if you know this, I registered the What's Your Baseline domain in 2009, and the good capitalist that I am, like any gym subscriber, I paid for it for years and didn't use it. And then in 2021, I thought, okay, either I cancel the domain, or I do something with it. So I started writing articles, and then in 2021 we started the podcast, which we're now in year 5. Hooray! Who have thought that? So we did all that stuff, right? And we built actually, I think, quite an audience, quite a community with it. A couple of thousand people, which is
It's
great.
all
I
you
love that.
guys. Yeah, we love you guys.
Yeah, and then and that might be the part that people didn't know, because I did it as a proof of concept, if you will. I built a couple of products and built a web shop and all that type of stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of people haven't noticed it because they haven't bought. But anyways, so some people have bought it, so the ideas that I had there with templates, with tools, that was the proof to say, okay, yeah, that there seems to be a market for this type of thing. And then obviously with a little bit more fanfare, I wrote 2 books, and there's more to come, right? So that's actually the most tangible ones that I love to hold in front of the camera. But we also did audiobooks, and spoiler alert, the royalties at Spotify are crap.
Yes. And in fact, I think, Roland, we talk about this episode, what we're talking about is really not just us and what we're going to do, although in this episode, you'll hear all about our future, but it's also the process by which somebody scales up a hobby into a business. And I think that's an interesting topic in general. I mean, I've done this multiple times with other projects in particularly the music industry, but this is the kind of thing that you can do with what we do, because the kind of information that Roland and I have, and where the thought leadership we're able to create, has value. And so in part of proving that people will come and listen, we've proven that the market is ready to receive that. And then now the question is the form factors by which we can deliver and sell it and scale that into something that is actually a business for reals. So you heard Roland's history bringing us up to the podcast and the books, but you also know that we've been developing a LinkedIn community of people who are giving us feedback and commenting on our posts, and Roland does a fantastic job with that, as well as providing us great guests. And we get approached, you might not know this, but we get approached relatively frequently by external parties looking to have their people on the show. And so it's sometimes you'll see a guest where we've been pitched it by some agency and they've got something interesting to say. And sometimes you'll see a community member who's asked us a good question. We think, hey, maybe they should come on and talk about that for an hour. And we love that.
Or some things come out of the blue. You might remember our conversation that we had with Itu about when his new enterprise architecture book and all that stuff. He just reached out and said, hey, I wrote a book. I know that you're doing that stuff. Do you want to talk? And I'm all game for this, so I love that. There's also maybe just to wrap up what we've done from the new stuff. You've seen it. We started a Substack in January, which I think evolves nicely. When I look at the number of subscribers that we have, maybe because it's also free, and we also started a Patreon because somebody needs to pay for the microphones and all that other stuff. But anyways, that's in its infancy. But I know somebody has it on his plate and needs to do a good job in growing that as well. But I think that the most important thing in that whole thing is actually, who do we do it for? Right. And that is the thing that is consistent since we started this whole thing. Right. And JM, correct me if you have a different, or chime in if you have a different answer, right, to this. I think the target audience that we have for What's Your Baseline is practitioners. In the process, in the architecture space,
and practice leaders, but both practitioners.
I would include them.
We have player coaches as well. Like that, I feel like a lot of architecture practices aren't fully managed by a manager, but rather by an experienced practitioner who has now some HR responsibilities on top of their regular delivery.
Yeah, but it's so that is one, people actively doing something, be it in a leadership role or being it in a contributor role. The second target that I see is actually the next generation. And that might be, and I know you don't see that, I might be old. But obviously at a certain age, you start thinking about, okay, what's next? What's your legacy? And one of the main motivations that I had was, okay, maybe somebody can learn something from the mistakes that I make and have made, and it just simply avoids them, right? So how do we get the next generation in? Especially when I think about the times that we live in today, where you have
Hmm.
instant gratification and you go to Claude and Claude gives you whatever, an app. I want to talk about the quality, but it gives you an app, you know, and you might not understand what the foundational stuff is underneath.
Yeah, I also think that the next generation is, in some cases, are in a very vulnerable position. I mean, a lot of folks can't afford to necessarily attend college in the same way that they have been able to in the past. So, there's a lot of challenges, particularly in the United States right now. I know there's a lot of folks who are struggling to make ends meet, and as a result of that, they've had to scale back some of their educational aspirations. People aren't necessarily getting MBAs. They're going straight into the workforce after high school, or after a community college degree, or after a liberal arts degree and not a specialist degree, or things like that. But they have a passion and an interest in the discipline. And so the question is, how do you get there? So I'll give you a really good story. A friend of mine, actually somebody who's really really close to the show, what had spent a while in a career that was fantastic, but wasn't necessarily paying them what they were looking for, and wasn't challenging them in a way that they found interesting. So they went and studied in I think a 1 year course on programming, specifically focused on developing for web developers, and creating this sort of incubator for women in web development. And going complete pivot on their career, they ended up working for a major financial institution doing web development, and
Mm.
massively improving their financial situation, and also providing them brand new challenges. They're brilliant. They're a brilliant human being. They're also smart and funny, but like, they're, particularly when it comes to creating content for this financial institution, it took inspiration, it took an alternate path of education, and it took a push by other people who were doing this kind of thing. I feel like sometimes we see that in process and architecture as well. People who don't have a master's in engineering. I mean, the way that I did it is probably not the way that the next generation maybe should do it. Maybe more work experience and more mentorship that leads you down that path. So that's kind
I
of my vision
see.
as well.
Yeah, I see another danger, and I see that and that's just an example. It's all over the place. I see that with the little audit company that I worked for, who
Yeah.
basically just cut their entry level positions by half.
Replace it with
So
AI.
how do
And
you,
how much is that working,
yeah,
right?
how do you get the next generation of experienced people, right? In if you don't hire junior people who just learn,
Entry
so that
level
is
roles with a 5 year experience requirement. Like,
yeah, and three
I've been
languages
reading
and
those.
and
I know.
two stays abroad for an extended time, and yeah, it's all nonsense.
And
It's all
resumes
nonsense.
evaluated by AI. So you have 1,000 people applying for every one
Yeah,
job. I
yeah,
mean, it's like,
yeah, yeah.
it is tough out there. And I think that this also gives people, and this is what I hope for the next generation, and talking a little bit into the third point here, which is bringing people together to learn and grow as a process community. I think that we are hoping to help people create sustainable businesses on their own as either independent consultants or with small firms that they're creating out of their own learnings that include some of the knowledge we pass on through What's Your Baseline. That's the idea,
Hmm.
is enabling this community to grow itself, grow the discipline and practice, but then also sell services alongside that to help organizations achieve those excellence goals we've put in front of them before, but from different perspectives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I do. And then there's a fourth step, and to be very blunt, it's just to make a living doing what we're currently doing, and what we will talk about in the rest of the episode. To say, okay, there is something more than just entertainment, more than just a hobby, of
Mhm.
the two of us, that we've done it in the last couple of years. But maybe
Yeah.
JM, what does it take to build a thing like that? If we move on to the next
Yeah, it's
topic.
a good question. Yeah, so moving from a hobby to a real company is a mindset shift. First and foremost, is that we are taking a conscious step forward from creating things out of the goodness of our heart for the purpose of helping people, to selling things through that thought leadership that people can purchase, and that financial transaction get even more from. So the first thing is we need an actual company. It's not just just a project. It is a real business, which means it needed to have a legal structure. We need to be working out a tax agreement. We need to have documentation, paperwork of signed agreements with the people who we're working with and between each other. We need to actually turn this into a legal entity. And
Mhm.
that's a non-insignificant amount of work, but it's also, depending on the state or country you're in, it can be something that can be achieved at very low cost, just a little bit of hassle. And
Yeah.
Roland, thank you for setting that up. I think we're registered in Virginia, but
Yeah.
we have worldwide service as a result of the tax treaties and work treaties we enjoy.
Yeah. I'm the only guy in Virginia. Yeah. So,
Yes.
but that was actually pretty easy. $200 later, a few days later, everything was done. You need to renew it annually, which is fine. You obviously need to pay taxes. You need to
Yeah.
have insurance and all that other nonsense that you need to have. Yeah, but I think that from a content perspective, I think the idea was or is to bring people together, right? So build a
Yes.
network of experts, and then I don't know how to say that in a polite way. Basically, have the Airbnb model. Bring together people who have something to sell with people who want to get rid of their money, right? And as a company, take a cut from it. It's not unusual. Look at Apple and Amazon and all those guys who do that
Yeah.
as well, right?
It's a good model, and that's part of the thing we had to develop here, which is a business model that actually works, and we're still working on that.
Yeah,
Trust me,
yeah.
everything is always in growth mode. But what do we think people can make that has distinct value that we can put a price on, and what do people we think that are buying things like that in the marketplace look to purchase? And if we find a fit, something somebody can create that has tangible, specific value, and something that people are looking to buy, that's a product.
It's also the thing how you do your product structure, right? So I don't know if anyone gets nervous and hangs up now to say, oh, they put a paywall in front of the podcast. No, we
No.
won't. So some of the things, or Substack, they will stay free, right? So it's more like if you go into a B2B scenario that we want to play, right? And we'll
Yeah.
talk about what we're thinking about the different areas a little bit later.
Oh,
But
there's also a little bit B2C. I don't want to forget the Patreon, that where you can go and find really cool extra tidbits on every episode, and early access, and our community on Discord, and all those sorts of things that we have ready for you if you're interested in giving us money every month for an enhanced experience with the existing What's Your Baseline. But that's the second thing. And actually, let's speak to the next piece of the puzzle, Roland, which is
Yeah.
technology. Because we've been doing a ton of technology evaluation, even just to make the podcast you're already seeing. But as we scale this up to a business, there's so much more technology we needed to introduce, and we need to figure out what was going to work for us.
Yeah, so we went through a learning curve, obviously. Uh, I'm happy to post it, and I posted it last summer. For example, our first dabblings with video. That was me with iMovie on my laptop. Good job, Roland.
Yeah.
I think we are a little bit better now. We went through different platforms where we recorded, Soundtrap and Zencaster, and now we're doing that with Riverside, and going through different tools for editing and audio and all that type of stuff.
You still love Audacity, and I learned Adobe Premiere Pro. That was fun, but also using tools like Adobe Enhancer, or even Auphonic, which is a cool, like, algorithmic audio enhancement tool. Plus, Soundtrap was a cool editing software for the first little while. We've been flitting through them, ultimately trying to deliver the best products to you. That's the but when we start to take a business and product approach, now we need to start looking at other tools. And Roland, you've done a ton of the evaluation here.
Yeah, I play with stuff, and I'm a big open source fan. So that's why when you say Adobe and make it sound as if it's the best, it ain't. But you like to spend your money, and who am I to? If you want to spend your money, do whatever you want. I would choose differently. Either way, but I think this is just one thing, right? So there's a thing between production and then there's the distribution, and then there's the internal collaboration. And I think that is these are the three areas. And for production, we spoke about the podcasts and videos and all that type of stuff. There's obviously at the other side of our operations, which is book writing, right? Or creating printable things. For that, we're using a tool called Reedsy, an editor. It's online. You can have people working with you on things, reviewing and all that stuff. And big shout out to my little German group, Markus Tuckelt, Martin Holling, Katrin Wetzel, Monika, for obvious reasons, right? Where we nerd about, how does this English term translate into German, and what will bring us on the German index or not. So that is all fun, and obviously tools support this. And then this is the production part of it, and then we use obviously Office programs and all that nonsense. But then there's the other part, which is the distribution, and that was what I found actually the interesting thing. Producing one thing, having a book, and then using a vector editor like Inkscape to create the title and whatever. That's one thing, but you need to get it out. And I learned a lot about the business model of the Amazons, Spotify's, Apple's, Google's, and all those in the world,
Yeah.
and how you get ripped off or not ripped off in this.
Not good percentages, Roland. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Spotify, I don't know how to come back. Audiobooks, they don't make a lot of money. I understand why the musicians don't like it. But anyway, I think it's interesting to see. It's a hurdle that you have to get through because everybody does it differently. There are print-on-demand offerings out there where you really can tell this is for professional publishers with professional printing audience. So they throw words around that I have not heard in my life before, right? And you need to learn that, and then you need to go to their approval through their approval process, And I don't want to name names, but I had one platform that rejected mine, any of the books, and I had to follow up. And they said they gave some weird error message, oh, we don't publish this type of content anymore. What do you make out of this? So there's a hurdle, and we've overcome that hurdle, right? So that is one thought when we talk about the offerings a little bit later, where there's obviously a benefit for the experts.
Yeah. The other thing you could do is we need to scale things up by force multiplying who we are. So we talked more about good people, and we've certainly assembled some fantastic human beings, but we also need an extended community of organizations that are willing and interested in to work with us. So the first thing is we've had a couple of people from tool vendors on the show, but as you might imagine, we also use some of their platforms in order to create content or create content for those platforms that becomes part of the offering set. So those are good strategic partnerships. We also have written for or had on the show or worked with people from industry publications. And those sorts of organizations are really important to both establish and maintain our credibility, but also to serve with the content that we're creating. Our thought leadership, you could use a rebroadcast from time to time. So for those of you folks out there, first and foremost, thank you. And secondly, let's talk more. And then Roland, you've been doing the circuit. Tell me a little bit more about your experience with people like All About Process Management.
Oh yeah, that's one example, right? So it's a small industry that we're working in, right? So people know people, and I think the closest that I've been to this is a conference in Germany that I was supposed to speak last year. It's called All About Process Management, and shout out to Stefan and David who have stood up that thing over the last couple of years and grown it into a 2-day conference. At that point, both were employed by the Stuttgart Fair. So for those of you who are not as good in geography as others, Stuttgart is one of the capitals of one of the German states. So they have a big fairground, not cows, but nice buildings, and all that type of stuff. They were working as developers there. And they had the idea to make a meetup first, and then a 1-day conference, and then a 2-day conference. And now this year they have a 2-day conference, and they have 2 satellite things. and David and I already spoke about maybe growing that abroad next year. We'll see. So we'll see how that works. But they also work together with our friends from the Prost Academy. And you've heard Matus and Daniel here in the podcast more than once, where they did like a hackathon last year. And we're thinking about having some training sessions going on, maybe a day before or in parallel to the conference. We'll see. So it's really interesting to see things also from the behind the curtain stuff. And David is doing a really good job. You get, he has a podcast studio that he builds there, and I will get a small table where I can put my books on, all that type of stuff. So it's really nice to see this, but it's just another thing of growing community, and that was their idea. And it's the same thing when you look at it, and I'm really wondering why nobody does that here in the US. And if you do, let me know how the people in Germany do more in-person communities. I'm thinking about Matus, who's doing some stuff in Munich. Katharina started something in Berlin. And then you obviously have Mirko and Martin doing their BPM Stammtisch in Hamburg. So there's a lot of going on of in-person. And I just don't see it here in North America. And maybe it's because the country is too big. I don't know.
I think the ABPMP has meetings, but it's not the same thing.
Which I will speak. Oh, gee, I need to get back to Mark Shazik and give him my abstract, Yeah.
Things to do.
Yeah. So there's other things. So what we do is, obviously the All About Prost mention is one thing. There's a couple of other places that we will speak. I just mentioned it. ABPMP is thinking about a thing. I will be part of a panel in May from the PEX network. Shout out to Michael and Fran, who we work with, and now Chloe I'm working with over there. So we try to get the word out and be somewhere in person so that people can meet us and we can interact in real life.
But all those things are the kinds of things you need to do in order to make a business work like this. I mean, a lot of what we do is relationship based. Yes, we've got thought leadership and experience of years of working in this industry, but none of that really matters unless someone believes and finds valuable the information and the approaches that we have. That's why finding opportunities to speak at these conferences, finding partners who we can trust, finding people who want to work with us to co-create these things, which is why collaboration is so important. We'll talk a little bit more about that work later. But that's how our trade is made in the relationships we build.
And it's also a reason why we will do our own little webinars. I do have some ideas where we'll see if we can transform it from virtual to in real life, but we definitely will start with virtual stuff, because it's easy to produce. We got all the tools and we learned how to use the tools over the last 5 years, so there will be more to come on that front as well.
But I think we're talking a lot right now about what we've had to do to get there, and people are really excited about what's coming next. So we're going to take a very brief break, and in the meantime, think about.
You're so nice, Chip. Oh, you suffered through all that nonsense, and now comes the big thing. But before we do that, we have a little break.
I know. Before we do, but to give you a sense to think about things, and in particular, think about the projects you've been part of that you had aspirations to turn into a business of your very own. Did you do them? And if so, how did it go? What lessons did you learn? And if you didn't, is it something you wish you did? And did you try? What did you come up against that stopped you from actually getting it to the point where it became a business of your very own? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our second section, all about what's your baseline in 2026 and beyond.
And welcome back. I'd rather not say what we discussed in the break. So JM, let's move on with the next topic.
Hey, that's a pitch for Patreon. You want to find out those secret behind the scenes conversations? You got to
Yeah,
subscribe to our
well,
Patreon right down below. And of course, you'll find all those secrets in our behind the scenes, what was left on the cutting room floor content.
this time you haven't missed anything, so skip it. But maybe JM, let's talk about what is the idea for what's your baseline in 2026 when we look at things that we produce, because I remember we had that nifty 4 areas and 2 bookends graphic,
Yes.
on this. Maybe you get us started on one thing.
Sure. Well, let's talk at the first piece of the puzzle. We are going to be creating packaged and productized knowledge. And that knowledge can be deployed in a bunch of different forms, but we are looking in our future of What's Your Baseline to sell some of that knowledge. Now, some of that includes exclusive access, and some of that includes wide access for anyone who wants to get a detailed and on demand, let's say a piece of paper, even that allows them to access that knowledge and use it in their daily work or just for interest and growth as they look to educate themselves in the next phase of their career. So, Roland, tell me a little bit more about. Let's break that down in the ways you think the
Yeah.
knowledge is best presented.
So yeah. So maybe to get just a mini step, right? So we have the things that we're doing that we continue doing. The
Sure, yeah.
podcast, that
Podcasts,
goes. The writing,
shorts,
that
all the
will,
things like that.
all that stuff, the Substack and all those things, right? That will continue. There will be no changes there. So, Hanneke, if you like to fall asleep listening to middle-aged men, that will continue. No worries, every 2 weeks you can take a nice nap. That's all good. The other thing is, as I said, packaged stuff. Yeah, and our working title is knowledge, right? So obviously, we have currently 3 books, right? So the architecture implementation, the process mining book, and that obviously in English and in German, which I'm pretty proud of to do this. But that's obviously a lot of work. So we already have one aspiring author from Toronto. So if you're listening, you know who I'm talking about, on this. But I had a couple of conversations about people who are interested in publishing, and we are an official publisher, believe it or not.
Yeah,
so
we have an imprint.
yeah. So we're in business there, and I learned a lot when I had that idea of doing the book about how you actually get ripped off by a traditional publisher, and I didn't like it. Right. So thanks for the 2 individuals who shared their contract with me. I don't want to name names, but it is really bad. You basically give away the bank if you go to a traditional publisher. And I spoke with 2 of them as well. Anyway, so books, but books are not necessarily like books, right? The one thing that they have in common is that they typically are on dead trees, but you can have them obviously in different formats and shapes. So
Yeah.
one thing is you would have books like the ones that I just wrote, an inch thick or whatever, 3/4 of an inch thick, about this. But we're thinking more of other formats. So one, and I'm not talking about audiobooks. That's the same thing, long content that you have to think about.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're thinking is, for example, something like visual guides, like a reference that you can put on your desk and you flip through, and it's highly graphical, and obviously it might be more tool oriented, right? With the partners that we're working with. That is one thing. And then JM, you're planning a mini series. Are you ready to talk about it?
Yeah, I'm in the process of writing. I'll be vague enough, but I'm in the process of writing a bunch of the guides that would go along with the kinds of knowledge we create. So business architecture, enterprise architecture, process mining, risk and compliance, those sorts of things, but from a very different perspective, for a different audience, although not really. Like I'm excited. More visual novels, more simple concepts explained easily so that you can teach it to explain it like I'm 5 to an actual 5-year-old. Find out more about that later when we start releasing a little bit of those stills from that. But it's an exciting idea, and once again, coming from the children's entertainment industry, it's a little bit easier for me.
Jam, you're a kid at heart, that will never change. So you're mostly
Hey,
qualified
listen,
for that stuff.
people who are learning this stuff for the first time, I don't want to say that senior executives who've never seen a process in their life kind of needs explaining like I'm 5, but people who've
It
been in
helps.
consulting for a while
helps.
look at each other sort of and whisper under your breath, that's probably what they need. Like, I mean, that's kind of a good thing.
We're also thinking about and that aims more towards the event stuff. We're thinking about seminars and webinars, so workshops that you might do, which is obviously based on the concepts that we put in paper, right? On this. And the idea behind this is obviously more interactive, right? If you meet somewhere for a day or half a day or whatever the time frame is, and people can ask questions, right? And when I think about a book, you just can't do so much. You can have bonus material, you can have files for download that you can practice it yourself, whatever. But it's per definition, you're remote, you're disconnected. You buy this and you read it, and then you have the questions. And I made, when you go to our web shop, I made an offer to say, hey, you buy a book and you buy an hour of consulting with me for $100, which is significantly under the regular rate. But I wanted to give an option to say, hey, if you have questions about what I wrote, by all means, and if you have a short question, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer, So
yeah, and that's in 3 forms, Roland. I see that as a public offer in the sorts of ways you do paid webinars or seminars, and a semi-public offer, which is through enhancement of existing programs at conferences and trade shows, and then through private offers, which is either to a team and an organization or to executives as part of an executive briefing. I mean, listen, if you're a new executive at a process company and you don't know jack about process, give us a call. We'd be happy to have a conversation, and you and your team would be aligned with what the terms and the practice means to make this really work.
Yeah, and it's again, this is knowledge, right? And the idea is when you think about from a business perspective, you obviously want to get certain products defined at different price points, right? If you go there and say, hey, I'm the best consultant in the world, and if you don't want to pay $800 an hour, I won't even work for you, then you cut out obviously a lot of people, because people might not be ready, right? They might be ready to pick up a book, right? That's a acceptable expense. If you pay whatever $20-$30 for a book, okay. Nobody dies from that. But if you say, oh, I could take this guy for whatever the rate is, and by the way, we won't charge $800. But when you're ready, there's something for this there. But this is knowledge.
My family business was a small business. Paying that those kind of rates would just not have flown. Do they deserve to have access to process-driven excellence? I would say yes. And so how do we make it tailored to that kind of offer, to that kind of client? And package knowledge, I think, is the way to do it. But it also bridges into tools and templates. Now I would do, because I do want to go to the second pillar. So knowledge is number 1. Number 2 is tools and templates. And Roland, you've already developed a few of those. And as you said, you put up a test balloon to see whether or not they were going to sell. And some of them did. But we think of this as
all of them. All of them sold.
All of them did.
Don't make it worse. Sure. Some more than others. Some more than others
sold.
Yes, but they're all sold. Come on, man.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So all of them sold. Some more than others. But one of the things we think about, and Roland and I do this calculus every time we create something like this, which is, what cost are you deferring in terms of consulting time or man hours to create this work product that buying a template for cash now would defer forever? And so, like, you get an example, like something like a method for your process architecture and tooling. Developing that would take a certain amount of time, and we know how much that would cost, and you can vastly reduce that cost by repeatedly buying and then repeatedly using a template for that. And that seems like a good business for everyone, because we make some money and you pay less money as your, so your cost of carriage of that practice is lower. So that's value.
Yeah, the idea is that while the first pillar is obviously entertainment, get the word out. The second pillar is packaged content, knowledge. This pillar is closing the gaps. Because what I've seen is in the tools, and that's not dissing any vendor, that they're trying their best, but there's a difference between when you get a tool, and I oversimplify. It's a box of Legos, and you say, okay, here's a box of Legos. Go build a ship, build a plane, build a truck, right? Or if you have someone who has built this stuff before and gives you things prepackaged, right? Or extends those things based on the experience that one has, to say, yep, this is the tool is the tool, it does what it does, right? And I oversimplify because I'm currently working on a product where you get one output is a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets do what spreadsheets do, rows, columns, numbers. And the question is, what the heck do I do with it now? And I'm currently working on a 9 workflow, which I hopefully will close out in a version 1 this weekend. A 9 workflow, as you know, I'm a big fan of that tool, that then takes that different input and spits it out in a meaningful way so that you can put it in a worksheet and then can do whatever you have to do with it. I want to be a little bit vague on this.
Yeah. And we are using as much open source as we can, like as much as open source that we can do, but we're also working with some of these tools. I mean, both Roland and I are experts in various platforms to create sort of gap closers in platform capabilities or prepackaged content that comes to those platforms. I like that.
I think the main differentiator in this field is the people that we've assembled. They have different backgrounds, from small and medium business to Fortune 500, right? So JM and I, we work with the big guys. They have other problems than, for example, Hanneke's clients. Who she even doesn't mention the word process management because it would scare off her customers, right? But they have the same needs. And I think the differentiator that we bring to the table is not only the industry focus, but it's also the underlying principles, right? So for example, a simple thing that comes to mind is you need to define the rules of engagement. What do we do and how do we do it, right? And now I could say, you need to have a model creation and a model approval and a model release process, which is correct, right? You need that if you haven't thought about that, but that doesn't tell you how it's done in a good way. So now we can take, and I have a big map of all of those items to say, okay, can we carve out one problem that somebody has and then build a package, build on the platforms that we have from our partners so that their customers can basically plug and play and get that solution up and running without having to have 3-4 weeks of consulting services and having a bespoke solution that then won't be updated. Because one of the promises that we have is when we build this stuff, we obviously will make sure that it works with the future version of the tools. Right? If the underlying tool changes, we will update that. And you will get a new version, right? If you want to go there.
And that works differently in a lot of the organizations we've worked with or seen in the industry, where it's sort of fire and forget. And that also leads us to the next piece, because we kept talking with these vendors and their platforms. We have been working, and we will continue to work on skills building offerings. So I'm thinking about training courses or various types of tutorials and mentorship that come along with some asynchronous, like sort of buy and use, some synchronous, which leads a little bit to our fourth pillar. But skills building is a big part of how we see our contribution to this realized, because we talked about the younger generation, people who are teaching themselves. We've talked about organizations where people are looking to skill up, grow in their careers, and be able to produce more value for their organization. That just requires skill.
Or the individuals who whatever got tasked with it and they are the sole person, right?
I
And
know.
they might not
Oh,
have done that before, and yeah. So it's the mix that I see here is also similar to the tools, to say, okay, one thing is, and I always say that a good training in my mind has to fulfill 3 criteria. One is it talks about concepts. To take a simple example, if you want to model a process, you need to know BPMN, right? So what's BPMN, right? That's a very valid question, and a lot of people asking that when they're new to this game. The second thing is there's some tools, right? Which buttons do I have to press, right, to accomplish something, which is obviously different from tool to tool. And the third thing is, well, what's the context in which I do those activities, right? So this is the governance, the rules of engagement, right? And I think if we build our third level, the third leg, the tools and templates, based on a method underneath how things work, well, guess what? This will obviously influence the training. And in the training area, I see 2 forms. One is obviously training online, right? And we try to do different trainings at different price points, right? To say, hey, to stick with that example, an introduction in BPMN shouldn't cost you $1,000. To be very blunt, right? It should be a course for somebody who doesn't want to go into a specific tool, but just learn about this. It should be done in an hour. And now we can talk about what is an hour training worth from a price point perspective. But again, I'm pretty sure everybody agrees it shouldn't be $1,000.
Also, I can see
Yeah.
those lower level trainings being something you can repackage and sell from like to like educational institutions. Think about this as a way to drive it further and further down, because we keep talking about the fact that university courses don't often teach process management until either late or never.
Yeah. And then but that might be another thing. You can bundle them, obviously, right? And then you can say, and I'm thinking out loud here. In my process mining book, I obviously wrote about the 6-step process, how to do this, right? You could, and we will obviously create training around those 6 steps. How do I actually do this, right?
Yeah.
You might recall, I'm talking about how to create a data model for process mining. I use NAN. Why not teaching that, how to do that? And I described it in the book. Or I'm talking about simulation as one analysis method, or Bayes analysis. I wrote 2 articles on Substack the last 2 weeks about this. So it's a mix. It's not just your process mining tool. And the idea is to say, okay, how can we package this? And that obviously would be then a different offer, where you say, okay, it's maybe a 2-day training, right? Or it could be, which I would love to do, like a college, university thing. Oh, we meet every Tuesday evening, for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you get your homework, and we're gonna meet next Tuesday again and answer questions. And after 8-10 weeks, we're done, and you get the nice certificate. So we will see what the formats are for this. I also brainstormed with Matus yesterday about what we could build together, and this is obviously then what's your baseline training and the Process Academy on things. Obviously, we're working with Matus and Daniel on the training for the conference end of September. Yep. So there's more to come, but the main idea is to have an online piece, right? Traditional e-learning, where you see videos and texts and quizzes, and we will definitely, and I chose a platform where you can do it, where you have a forum for each course. So if you take it today, you can come back weeks and months later, because that other people will have bought it, right? And the other people will obviously benefit from your questions, but you might come back and if you have a new question, and see if it was answered already as part of your course, that you will have access for eternity.
Yeah, community building Amazon. We talked about, right? That's one of the pieces of the puzzle. And Roland, I want to just get the last one here, because I think this is just an important reminder for people. Consulting, like both Roland and I do consult from time to time. It's not always, but we have in the past consulted, and we will do so again. So this is just, you see, the first three pillars are very much more, we put in the effort to create a reusable and scalable product on its own, and the fourth is really just time for money. Like, people will pay us per hour to come and help solve their business problems, and I think that is a good model that's well tested, but it's also a harder business to scale as the two
Yeah.
of us being the primary people running this thing.
Well, I hope we can grow, right? So it's not just the two
We
of
already
us.
have, but the point is that it's not as exponentially scalable. It's just linearly. The
Oh,
more
no.
hours you spend, the
Yeah.
more dollars you have.
Not only that, it's not scalable because everybody's day has just 24 hours. You can't
Yes.
clone a JM. But I think to put a nuance on it, I see two things. One is obviously the traditional consulting, right? And I had big buckets, assessments, implementations, helping accomplishing something, right? So that's what you would buy from a normal consulting company, right? Which we're happy to offer. The other thing is when we have those tools and templates, even though I'm of the opinion, even if our mothers tell us otherwise, we're not all special. I also do realize that some organizations have some special requirements.
Yes.
And if you buy one of those tools and templates, well, you might have to have it tweaked, right? And the idea is to say, okay, we're talking about hours or a day, not like a full consulting engagement, but to say, hey, we have this regulatory requirement. We need to put this field in the configuration, or we need a report, whatever it is. Can you tweak it? So that's the second part of the consulting, or of the services part, where we then say, yeah, sure. And it's a relatively low amount where you're still in combination with the base tool plus that little extra that you need the tweak for, is still significantly lower as if you would have it built custom by your consulting organization, which we're obviously also happy to do.
Consulting lets you tailor training. I've delivered a lot of trainings, and I don't think I've ever found a class fully satisfied if the training didn't match up with how they actually do their jobs. And so the adaptation of things, being able to customize it for each customer and their particular method and their particular approach and their deliverables and their cadence, all those sorts of things are things we can build into it and become internal champions for their platform and their approach and their team as part of how they communicate, which we've talked about before in a center of excellence. Communication is important. Change management is important. These are things we do really well. And as we take all those first three pillars and turn them into what specific companies need, that's consulting services.
We have another area, I mentioned it before, in lack of a better term, media services,
Yes.
of this. So we obviously learned a thing or two over the last couple of years. So it's basically three pillars in there as well. So one is, if you're an aspiring author and you look for a publisher, talk to us. We've been through the ringer multiple times. I could show a finished product in the camera, but anyway, so yeah, soup to nuts, right? Happy to share what we did here. If you want to publish through What's Your Baseline and you want to have the little green bee on your cover, let's talk, right? Same thing is obviously for podcasts. We helped a couple of podcasts get off the ground. I built a second podcast last year for a company on this. So if you have the need, we're happy to help you with that, from ideation actually to production and hosting, if you want
and
us to.
Post-production as well. Everything we do.
All that stuff. Yeah. And then lastly, it's more marketing support. I'm really looking forward. We have a conversation with one of the vendors next week. And I hope, crossing fingers, that we find some opportunities to collaborate. And we're happy to do that as well. We build a little audience here. So why not joining forces?
So that's what we're going to be offering. And I think those are pretty cool. I think those are things people will want to purchase. And I think those are things people will actually get value out of, which I think is the most important part. I mean, honestly, like, I like making money. Money's great, but money feels real dirty if getting it help nobody.
Yeah, it's not the main purpose. You need to pay the bills, of course, but but it's I think it's more the, I don't know, community aspect is the wrong word, but it's more
No,
like,
no.
hey, we're in here in the same boat. You know what I mean?
And you're leading to the next point, which is really good, the community aspect of things, which is, I think, part of the strongest thing we can offer for the industry is helping to keep bringing people together. Like we've been doing that through the podcast, and I think our hosts, co-hosts, and guests have gotten a chance in some cases to know each other, meet each other, like do cool projects with each other. That's amazing. And as we assemble our virtual team of experts, which we've already done a lot of already, we will pair them up with an extended association of contributors and a larger community of practice through our virtual spaces. And so right now, a lot of that is on LinkedIn, some of that's on Substack. We have the Patreon and Discord, and we've got a lot coming where we can bring people together around process and architecture and equip them to do more with what they already know.
So JM, in a fast rundown, I'm not saying hot or not, right? But in a fast rundown, what are the things that, if somebody listens at this point in time in the podcast, what are the tangible things that will show up, come out within the next weeks?
Yeah. So first thing you're going to start seeing is more of these TLDRs. So I love media products in different formats. I like shortening their content to the sort of the core idea and putting it out in extremely consumable formats that can be seen if you're watching on mute when you're on the train. So TLDRs are these short form 1 minute contents. We've seen videos, you've seen that from some of our guests, and I've got a ton that are ready to film or are ready to release. So you'll start seeing those coming out immediately. And of course, Roland, you've been selling things on a web shop before, but we are moving to a new web shop platform, which is really exciting. We've done a lot of evaluation of what's going to work, and this one I think uniquely offers both the ability to sell stuff and also it is connected in with learning management. So this becomes a mechanism of creating and selling courses through something we can control. Once again, not just giving away all the money to a third party provider, and also giving us more control over how we deliver content to people. And that leads us to the next piece of the puzzle, which is about books. Oh my goodness, we are creating even more full content production through books, and those books are in various formats that you should be expecting to see some teasers and then pre-releases in the coming weeks and months, because we are in the process of writing. I mean, for me, I'm in the process of getting ready to deliver, I think, 6 books, very short books, much shorter content books, as we go. And Roland, you have, I think, 2 more books in the chamber that you were thinking about writing, partially writing. It's things coming out.
It's a couple of things. One is another traditional book, and I think I mentioned it. It will be called Successful Method Configuration, right? To stick with that successful and a practical guide subline. And it's about when you buy a tool and what are the things that you should create, and I hinted about it for those of you who bought my first book. In the appendix, I was talking about how to do data modeling, conceptual, logical, physical, screens, whatever. It will be in the same vein. For those of you who have the first book, you can skip the data chapter. I will just copy it over. It's still good. But there's obviously different views. What are the different views that you should take a look at? So that is definitely in the works. And then I mentioned the visual guides before, right? So how do we get those visual reference guides there, right? And what I'm thinking is, without promising anything yet, for example, if you do simulation, that's sometimes a little bit complicated topic, from where do I have to fill in what, and how do I build things and how do I read it? And I think a visual guide would be helpful. Or when you think about creating data models in Nine, those are ideas that are floating around. But those visual guides also would be, I think, a co-product to any training that we create. So
I agree.
yeah, you do the training, but then you got something tangible in your hand, and you can follow through and see what that happens. So I defined that those visual guides template, if you will, need to find a print on demand that does spiral binding. So that will be another challenge, to do this before they come out. But yeah, that's what I'm personally working on right now. In addition to a few trainings, short trainings, and with 2 tools that I'm currently on.
That also talks about form factors, Roland, because I think that we said it a few times in this podcast, but the way that you receive information about how to do your job needs to be adapted to the way you learn. Learning styles are
Mhm.
real and important, and also your level of maturity in the practice, your level of maturity as a practitioner, your particular organization, your work. Like we are trying to refactor this content in as many ways as possible to just make it so you can get it when you need it and how you need it. And that's some,
Yeah.
so once again, we are also looking at finding ways to refactor these things every way. So whether or not you can listen to it or see it or read it or be able to use it as a template that you can pull from, like all these things are important to
And
us.
it's also again, I mentioned it before, it's making things accessible at different price points.
Yes. And also bringing a community in.
The 2 bookends, you might have a template, a tool that costs thousands of dollars, right? Which is still cheaper than a custom bespoke consulting engagement. But yeah, to put this in, a couple of $1,000 versus $30 for a book, or 15 or 20, it's
Yeah.
different price points. And what we want to, or training that costs whatever, $300, $400, $500 for a day, right? For an individual, right? Different things. So the idea is to say, okay, how can we define those problems? And then obviously have them specified in a certain way that they then meet the different points where you pick up the audience.
Yeah. And speaking of picking up the audience, I mean, that's one of the things that's the last thing I'll talk about here, which is this idea of creator spaces. I think that the conversations that are happening within organizations about process and architecture are too often just staying within their organizations, or they're being presented in conferences incredibly asynchronously, or like basically incredibly periodically, as in like you have every 3 or 6 months you'll get together and talk about something. But we think this is a living and breathing and like evolving space, and it's moving faster than that. So creator spaces, practitioner spaces, that's why I'll be talking a little bit more about Discord, which is a tool that I happen to like as a mechanism of having these synchronous conversations, asking each other for advice and support with these ideas to grow as a practitioner, like on demand from each other's knowledge, and to talk about stuff that you hate. Like, listen, people are complaining every day about how their organization doesn't want to think about process and architecture management because they think it's going to slow them down. Great. Let's all have that conversation. But instead of one-on-one, let's have a larger space we can post and support each other on. I don't see as much of that as I think I'd want to, but we can help shepherd that.
And it's the first step, obviously, bringing in people, getting to know each other.
Yeah.
But then also the stepping stone for in-person things, meetups, unconferences, whatever, which is a little bit less formal. And speaking of that,
Roland, how do you find us, right?
Yeah, well, I think in real life, I mentioned it earlier. So one is I will speak TBD when, sometime in spring, I guess, with ABPMP. With the Philly chapter, it will be virtually. So ABPMP International will have that. I will be on that panel with the PAX network. I guess it's in May. And then I intend to be in Germany twice this year. One, obviously, go there end of September. So I think September 30th, October 1st, the All About Process Management Conference, and Monica and I will be there for this. And there will be a discount for you, dear listeners, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And then I will try to be there in June. That might be more like business development, catch up with the guys, planning stuff, But Martin, if you're listening, if I make it to Hamburg, I want to have that toilet paper award, that you built for the longest commute, So that would be the in-person where to meet us. Obviously, feel free to reach out to us on the usual channels.
Please,
we
do.
really love to see you. Obviously in the stuff that we do on the product, the forms that I mentioned, but obviously in things like the Discord or the Patreon, which is connected to it, all those things. All right.
And that's a callback to our audience. And first and foremost, thank you for sticking with us for the episode where we talk about things we are proud of creating, and hopefully it's resonated with you. This is something that we're doing to help our audience grow and learn, and we hope that it's the right thing for you, which does lead me to the question about the survey, because Roland,
Yeah.
you set that out and
Yeah.
we've gotten some great responses, but boy, we could use some more feedback from you. We're keeping it open a little longer. Once this episode comes out, hopefully it'll encourage our audience to go and answer those survey questions.
Yeah, so I created a survey, Google Forms, so nothing special. You might have seen it on LinkedIn. I did it 2 weeks ago. I just at the date of recording, I sent out a little reminder yesterday. When this episode comes out, it will be open for another week. It's 3 simple questions. If you had a magic wand, what would you do? Right. So that type of stuff. It's open-ended questions. So no boring radio boxes and whatnot. I really want to know what you're thinking. What is your problem? What's keeping you up at night? Because
Mhm.
I would love to build stuff that will help you solving your problem, and not just having the 7 of us sticking our heads together and maybe being way too high level because we're consulting with the Fortune 500 and they have different problems. You know what I mean? And your input is very much required. So I will put a link to those forms in the show notes. It will be open for another week after publishing. And the little goodie for those of you, and we currently have about 24 who have replied. Thank you, by the way, for those of you who already did it at the time of this recording. For those who replied, you will obviously get the summary, right? You will get what did the others say, right? So that you can compare. Oh yeah, is what I did, what I answered, is that the same problem that others have, or am I an outlier, right? So that is our promise to you. If you want to answer those 3 questions, and you leave your email address so that I can send it to you, then obviously we will.
And of course, you can actually join us. We are always looking for more contributors as we build out our network of experts. And so, for instance, if process management, architecture management, governance, risk and compliance, customer journey, if this is your jam, let us know, and we'd love to include you in whatever way makes most sense with your current employment status, with your current interest and focus, with your current, like, the kinds of offerings you like to create. Like, these are things we would love to include you. So get in touch with us. And that's something that's sort of over and over again. Get in touch with us if this
Yeah.
is interesting to you, and let us know what is interesting to you, because we would love to have you join our little project that is now a company.
Yeah, I think it's 3 things if I would summarize it. One is obviously if you want to give us input, oh, I think you should produce this, right? In any of those things, knowledge, skills, tools, consulting, media. If you have some ideas, please send them to us. We're always eager to learn and not just to pretend that we know everything. The second thing is if you want to become part of our network, right? Please use our platform, right? Talk to us. We will walk you through what the deal will be, in regards what the activities are and what you can expect, even monetarily, right? And I can promise you it will be better than what you get at other publishers, for example. And then the third one is if you have a problem, right, as a company and you need help, talk to us, right? We're happy, as you've heard, services is an offering. We're happy
Yep.
to work with you, right?
We've seen a lot of stuff, and we both of us and our extended, our community we've already established have a wide breadth of experience, from industry
Yeah,
to size of
decades.
company to geography. Like, this would be a pretty cool place to come, and also we're not threatening. We're not big old like suit wearing jerks. We
I'm not
have
sure
a
about you,
little bit
JM.
of a fun behind what we
I'm not
do.
sure about you. I'm a little bit scared when I see you all day.
No, I know. But hey, listen, the last thing I'll say here is the support you've given us is fantastic. And this is not asking people who just want to watch the podcast to do anything more necessarily. But if you really love what you do, buy our stuff, support us on our platforms. Like, you can pay us monthly for the privilege of additional information, additional exciting content. You can subscribe on Substack to get more from Roland and I. Like, you can buy things on the web shop or hire us for helping your organization to grow and expand into a new area of things. We got merchandise. I mean,
Merch.
if you want to give us your money, we would love that, and it will help us. But you also get a lot from it. I would argue it is good value.
Yeah. We're bootstrapping here, right? To be very, very clear, we don't have a big daddy in the background who funds us.
No.
You know, we're bootstrapping. So whatever, if you want to help with your ideas, with your contribution, please, by all means. Having said that, JM,
yes.
I've done the outro so often
I know.
that I will not hand it over to you. So this time I will do it. You know, you need to get back in shape. So let's come to the point. Again, if you want to reach out to us, it's either hello@whatsyourbaseline.com or it's Roland@whatsyourbaseline or j-m@whatsyourbaseline.com. You can obviously reach us on our socials, right? So LinkedIn, join our LinkedIn community, Substack, wherever you find us. I think we're well established by now.
YouTube is great. Subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yeah,
that's also a thing. There.
Yeah, but maybe more importantly, tell your 5 best friends about the little podcast and the little company that could. You know, it's very much appreciated. And with that, I've been Roland Volt.
And I am J.M. Erlinson.
And we're going to see you in the next one.